Hello and welcome to First Page Fridays. I'm April Davila for Sit Right Here. If you don't know me, I'm a novelist and a mindset coach. I help aspiring authors write more and suffer less. And today we're going to be looking at somebody's first page. So we keep it anonymous. I don't even know who this person is who sent it in, but thank you very much if it was your piece. This doesn't work without you. And we're going to read it through together, and then I'll just jump back up to the top and I'll start editing as if I was working with a client, and I'll narrate my thoughts as I go along and edit so that we can all learn from the experience of sharing somebody's writing and looking at ways to maybe make it more clear, more concise, those kinds of things that we look for when we're doing a line edit. So I'm going to start by shrinking myself down here, moving me down there. And I would ask your forgiveness if I mispronounce things. I have, as I said, I've not yet read this through myself, so it's my first read. Blood on the stoop. Storm clouds gather over the parched fields of Matabaland, the air thick with the threat of rain and unrest. Blake Armstrong stepped out of the farmhouse, pausing on the veranda to study the darkened sky. His mind was already turning over the year ahead. The rains were late, so was everything else. He found his manager, Kudzai, in the sheds, checking over the equipment with quiet efficiency. All well this morning, Kudzai? Blake asked. Excuse me. His pale blue eyes still held their usual twinkle, but it didn't quite reach the rest of his face. Yes, Mr. Armstrong. Where to first? The Northfields. I want to see if they're ready for planting. He paused, glancing toward the tobacco lands. Caleb's out that way, he added, more to himself than to Kudzai. Should be heading back soon. I have high hopes for that boy. He's like a son to me, Kudzai grinned. Always keen to apply himself. Good lad. I have a feeling he's hungry for more responsibility. Hard to believe he was still in school when he came here with his father, Kudzai chuckled. I didn't know that. He handles himself well for his age. And Mara? She's never far from his side. With a subtle smile, Blake replied, yes, I've noticed that too. She's got spirit, that one. Just hope she doesn't distract him from his work. No, Kudzai shook his head. They make a good team. To see them happy together lifts the workers' spirits. I'm hoping my daughter has a passion for farming like I did at that age. She's the future, and who knows, perhaps her distraction is a game. Ha! Don't think she needs any trick to have Caleb's attention. All right, so my first response to just reading this through for the first time is that it's a lot of dialogue for a first page, and that it is a lot of names to try to keep track of. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm going to just start by breaking up the dialogue, because the other thing is that this is a really solid piece of text, and I found it a little hard to track who was talking. So let's just start with that. We have Blake Armstrong, which reads to me as a very Western American European kind of name. He steps out, so I'm not sure where Metabaland is. I'm not going to Google it. I'm going to read it as if I were a reader. It might be helpful if you can give us a hint of like where in the world it is, especially since we have names that seem to me associated with other parts of the world. So Blake finds his manager, Kudzai, in the sheds checking over the equipment with quiet efficiency. Usually when we start a new bit of dialogue, we will do one of these. All well this morning, Kudzai? Blake asked. His pale blue eyes still had their usual twinkle, but it didn't quite reach the rest of his face. So I'm assuming this is all description of Blake. Yes, Mr. Armstrong, right? Where to first? Okay, the Northfields. So then that's Kudzai, and then Armstrong, the Northfields. I want to see if they're ready for planting. He paused, glancing toward the tobacco lands. And I'm going to assume this is still Blake talking. Caleb's out that way, he added, more to himself than to Kudzai, right? Okay. Should be heading back soon. I have high hopes for that boy. He's like a son to me. And then we switched to Kudzai. Kudzai grinned, always keen to apply himself. And then, good lad. I have a feeling he's hungry for more responsibility. So I'm assuming that we're going back and forth between Kudzai and Blake. Like with this double, like this break in quotation marks. So if I am wrong, just know that that's the perception of it, and you'll need to adjust a little bit. Of course, it's your story. I always like to say, these are my suggestions. There are no rules. This is just how I'm perceiving it and how I suggest you clarify. Good lad. I've a feeling he's hungry for more responsibility. Hard to believe he was still in school when he came here with his father. And then I think it sounds like we're back to Kudzai. I didn't know that. He handles himself well for his age. And Mara. So then again, Mara, and my association with the name Mara is my neighbors, and they're South Indian or South Asian. They're from India. So now in my mind, we've got characters, because Kudzai feels like a very Japanese name to me, but again, this is just my perception. I might be wrong. So we have interesting names. By the names alone, I'm intrigued to know, like, how are these people all working on a farm together? That's interesting to me. I didn't know that. He handles himself well for his age, and Mara, she's never far from his side. And then we're back to Blake with a subtle smile. Blake replied, "Yes, I've noticed that too. She's got spirit, that one. Just hope she doesn't distract him from his work." And then, no, Kudzai shook his head. They make a good team. They seem to see them happy together lifts the workers' spirits. And then I'm presumably back to Blake. I'm hoping my daughter has a passion for farming like I did at that age. She's the future, and who knows, perhaps her distraction is a game. And then, okay, so we have another quotation mark here, but we don't end the quotation mark here. But it does seem like we switch dialogue. Okay, so dialogue isn't necessarily a bad thing. Just know that so the challenge here is that we don't know these people yet, and we don't know where they are. So right now it's just named kind of blobby entities floating in space, having a conversation. We get a little bit of anchoring. I really like this opening sentence. We get that we're on some sort of farmland, and that storm clouds are gathering over parched fields. So maybe there's some drought happening. This opening bit does do a good job of setting the scene. So he found his manager. So Kudzai presumably is the senior here. So, and you can see how when I'm starting to try to put this together, why it's hard to bring in more than 2, maybe 3 characters on the first page, because my brain is trying to figure out what's the relationship. How do these people exist with each other in whatever space we're in? And Blake says, "All well," which sounds like someone, because the Kudzai is checking over the equipment, and Blake says, is everything all right? All well this morning? And then he says, "Yes, Mr. Armstrong." That doesn't seem like Kudzai is the manager, or unless Blake is like the owner. Okay, I'm getting it. Okay, Blake Armstrong is the owner of the farm. You might say like his supervising manager. It's the phrase "his manager" that threw me off. So you might say like the farm's manager, the farm's manager, or just phrase it in a way that it doesn't sound like Kudzai is Blake's manager. Does that make sense? We want to imply, now that I understand, Blake is the owner of the land. He has hired he has a manager, Kudzai, and then Kudzai is, so even though he's a manager, he's not Blake's manager. Got it. Okay. We do get a little bit of description of Blake. He has blue eyes, so I'm going to presume Caucasian. But I don't get any description of Kudzai. Don't get any description of Caleb or Mara, or then we get the daughter down here. There's a lot to keep track of in here. So my suggestion will be to slow down a little bit. Do a little bit, because you start really well with us in scene and you bring us into the thing that's happening, but then it's almost like we're trying to get so much information in here that I kind of lose the thread. So let's start here. He finds the farm's manager, Kudzai, in the sheds, checking over the equipment with quiet efficiency. "All well this morning, Kudzai." So this would be an opportunity, excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold. To give us you could give us a little detail about him. Like, is he a big man, a small man? Is he thin? You could say like his thin frame bent over the equipment as he worked with quiet efficiency. I am making assumptions here just to give the example of how you might give some details. I don't know that this is how you picture Kudzai. I'm just going to take a shot at it here. So he found the farm's manager, Kudzai, in the sheds. His thin frame bent over the equipment as he checked it with quiet efficiency. So again, looking for just little ways to give us a hint of like, who is this person, Kudzai? What does he look like? All well this morning, Kudzai? Blake asked. The pale blue eyes. So, okay, that's Blake. And it says, usually he has a twinkle, but didn't quite reach the rest of his face today. So we know he's stressed, right? Even from the storm clouds, and he's worried about the year ahead. So Blake is starting to take shape. Yes, Mr. Armstrong. Where to first? This is fine, but again, I wonder if, like, you can get a little bit more description in here. Like, he looked up from his work, and then give us maybe some sort of description of his face. Maybe he has a scar. Like, characters with scars are always very easy to remember, and they're interesting. There's nothing more boring than like a perfectly handsome or perfectly attractive character. People are much more interesting when they have some flaws, like maybe one eye is squinted or clouded over, or I don't know. Can you give us something specific? Or maybe he is a handsome individual. And Blake noticed that he looked, I'm just going to go with looked tired. His hair, and let's say, okay, whenever we mention the hair, it's an opportunity. So his short, dark hair was disheveled. Did I spell that right? And then put in the where to first. So you can see, like, starting to break up the dialogue with a little bit of description and world building. It will slow it down a little bit so that we have time to get to know Blake and Kudzai before you start bringing in more characters. Because when you bring them in before we know the people who are already on the page, it just gets confusing for your reader. The Northfields. Okay, so what is Blake doing at this point? Right now, he's just kind of standing there staring at Kudzai. Could he be fidgeting? Like, let's say he like ran his hand over the, I don't know, like I'm picturing like, are there horses, right? Maybe he like runs his hand over the snout of one of the horses that's leaning over a wall in the barn, or maybe he picks up a tool to inspect it. We'll do a tool since you haven't mentioned anything about horses. He picked up a tool, and I'm not going to take the time to research like farming tools for you, but you might want to be specific. Like, he picked up I don't know. I'm not a farmer. I don't know. Picked up I'm going to put specific. We'll put specific tool, something that would be in this world, right? This is your opportunity to start introducing us to the world. And inspected the edge for sharpness, whatever it is. And then back into the speaking. So the edge here. I want to see if they're ready for planting. He paused, glancing. So this is exactly what I'm talking. He paused, glancing toward the tobacco lands. Now, he's in the shed. So is he glancing out? I'm going to say out the door toward the tobacco lands. And again, you might be more specific with door, like the wide double doors of the barn, or is it really just a shed, in which case it's like, maybe it's the narrow door. Like, again, I'm not quite sure how to picture this because we haven't gotten those details yet. So there's opportunity here for specificity. I'm just going to leave it as door, but you can do more. Toward the tobacco lands. Okay, so now we know they're growing tobacco. So now my brain is thinking more like American South. But again, that's my American bias. Maybe they grow tobacco in Japan. I actually don't know. And again, I'm making the assumption that Kudzai is a Japanese name. Caleb's out that way. So now we've introduced Caleb. And I'm curious, like, it seems like early morning, like things are just getting started. Caleb's already beat him out there. So that tells us something about Caleb right away. He added more to himself than to Kudzai. Should be heading back soon. I have high hopes for that boy. He's like a son to me. Okay, so we know that Caleb's not a biological son, but that he cares a lot about him. That's a good detail. Kudzai grinned, always keen to apply himself. And then back to Armstrong, or Blake rather. Good lad. I have a feeling he's hungry for more responsibility. Hard to believe. So this feels a little expository. Hard to believe he was still in school when he came here with his father. I wonder if there's another way. Like, so when we say something, when we have characters say something to another character that both characters already know, you've done kind of as well as you can with that by having him remark of like, oh, it's hard to believe, but it still feels a little expository. Because if you were talking to someone who knows this, you might not be so specific. And again, specificity is good for prose. In dialogue, sometimes it's not, because if two characters already know something, they're not going to be super specific. Like, I'm not going to walk into the other room and say to my husband, our son, and it's a good thing our son started high school this year. Like, I'm not going to tell him things he already knows. So you have to think about, in dialogue, sometimes it's appropriate to be a little more vague. And I wonder if you could have this line be something like, wow, he's come so far since he came to the land, or just a little more vague so it doesn't feel expository. And because I don't know your story, I'm just going to leave that there. But as a note, you might consider editing that a little bit. Kudzai chuckled. Oh, he didn't know that. Hard to believe he was still in school when he came here with his father. So is the thing that's hard to believe that he was young or that he was in school? Because again, I don't know where they are. They're on a farm, clearly a tobacco farm, but is it the kind of farm where and I don't know what year this is either. This really, aside from having a lot of different kinds of names from around the world, which speaks to a more modern story, this really could be anytime since people started farming tobacco. There's no technology per se, like even the tools that he's working on, we don't have any specificity around, like the specific tool. If it's like a highly computerized tractor versus a hoe, that might give us a hint of like what year we're in. But so if Kudzo didn't know that he was still in school when he came here with his father, this is throwing me off a little bit. And it might be solved by doing a little more world building. Like, my mom grew up on a farm. She went to school. She continued to go to school even though she lived on a farm. So he was still in school is more aimed at saying, hard to believe he was so young when he first came here. And then of course Kudzai would know that if the character was young. Meh. I don't know. I'm getting a little lost in here because I don't know what your intentions are. I think you need to slow down a little and give us some more detail in the prose, not necessarily the dialogue. So maybe it was like hard to believe he was so young when he first came here. Kudzai, I didn't know that he handles himself well for his age. Or maybe he says like, I always thought he was older. He handles himself well for his age. And Mara. And then I'm not sure why we jumped to Mara. What sparks? So I think you need something in here. And I'm sorry, I usually try to be more specific, but because I don't want to make too many assumptions about your story, but he handles himself well for his age. And then something happens to make him think of Mara here. Like we need some sort of transition, some reason that he brings Mara to mind. And then maybe have him reflect on that. Or just say, and Mara's never far from his side. You could also just do that. But I also think allowing something to remind him, maybe Kudzai looks out the door too and sees Mara fetching water this morning. But I guess if she's close to Caleb's side, she wouldn't be there. She would be with Caleb. So maybe this becomes a reflection of like, yeah, she's probably out that way too. In the North Fields. She's never far from his side. Or maybe someone asks, I don't know. We just need a little more building out of this world so that we understand what's going on. And I would say maybe waiting to bring in Mara. Like if you're doing this world building and it's gonna make it so that by the time you get here, you're at about a page. So a page is about 250 words. The first page is usually about 250 words. If you're building out the world a little bit, you probably won't get to Mara on the first page. And I think that's a good thing. What we really want to do is pose some sort of question. I like that we have the question of like, will it rain? The rains are late. He's stressed about that. Maybe keep that question front and center. If it doesn't rain, what's going to happen? Like on that first page, you want to pose the question that people will want answered, and that's why they keep reading, right? So is it the question of the reins, or is it something about Caleb, or is it something about Blake? I would take the time on this first page to build that out and not worry about introducing Mara and Blake's daughter. Yeah, I think 3 characters is enough for the first page. So I hope this was helpful. I know I struggled a little bit with some of the details because I didn't want to make assumptions about your story. Please feel free to jump into the comments if you want to share about it, or if this is not your story and you have ideas or suggestions. And of course, if you would like to have your story edited here on the channel, there's a link in the discussion below where you can send in your page and we will put it in our list of pages to be edited. We'll get to it as soon as we can. And thank you all. Thank you to the writer again for submitting your pages. Doesn't work if you don't share if you aren't willing to be vulnerable and put your work out there. And yeah, happy writing, everyone. I'll see you next time.